Hello and welcome. Today we are going to discuss both vegetarian and vegan diets for athletes and, what are some of the unique challenges that we see in these particular types of athletes and, what are some things we need to be aware of if we're working with athletes that are choosing a vegetarian or vegan lifestyle. I will say, at the beginning of this lecture, a lot of this information I didn't create. I took some of this information from the Gatorade Sports Science Institute, so much of this presentation comes from their website. And again, I've kind of added in some specific things when we think about, how this might specifically apply to both college or high school level athletes, but the majority of this lecture came from the Gatorade Sports Science Institute. So let's take a look at some of the topics that we are going to discuss within this unit. Vegetarian and vegan diets, we'll give them some specific definitions and look at the different subcategories within each of those divisions, potential dietary benefits, and also, some deficiencies that we need to be aware of. Nutrient considerations as we think about how to apply this particular lifestyle to athletics. And then finally, we'll end with some practical applications where we're able to sort of apply, what it might look like to live this particular type of lifestyle. So again, what are some examples of different meals and snacks that we could utilize if we were athletes and following either the vegan or vegetarian lifestyle? So let's start with some definitions. Again, this will be a review from our protein unit, but want to get these up here for us. Again, we think about vegan. This will include or exclude, all animal products, including dairy and eggs, and they may even exclude honey because honey comes from bees, and some people would consider bees to be an animal. So essentially with vegans or strict vegetarians, they're eating just fruits and vegetables or just those plant products. Okay. Vegetarians are going to avoid all flesh foods, so they may or may not use eggs. They may or may not consume dairy products, depending on, kind of how they classify themselves. But vegetarian, I would say, is a little bit more relaxed in comparison to a true vegan lifestyle. And so then we can look at, some of these kind of subcategories within vegetarian. So a lacto-vegetarian will include any type of dairy products. So they could include milk, cottage cheese, yogurt, cheese, etc. But they won't include eggs or other animal products. Ovo vegetarian, they will include eggs, but not dairy products. And then a Lacto-Ovo Vegetarian, which I would think of as kind of like the traditional vegetarian, will include both eggs and dairy products in their diets. Okay, so what are the reasons that individuals are choosing this vegetarian or vegan lifestyle? Again, when we think about the challenges associated with being an athlete, in addition to just the general challenges of getting the nutrients that we need, athletes are at a greater risk for some particular deficiencies, which we'll talk about here coming up in this particular unit. But they could choose this lifestyle for health-related reasons. Again, we see a lot of health-related benefits associated with choosing a vegetarian or vegan lifestyle. Maybe they're interested in the environmental impact of eating animal products, and so they want to kind of avoid those particular types of issues. Maybe they're concerned with some of the ethical issues related to animal cruelty, etc., things like that. Could be philosophical, religious, or spiritual reasons as well. At the end of the day, there's lots of different reasons, and it could be some sort of combination of these factors when we think about our athletes selecting this particular type of lifestyle. And again, I would encourage you, if you are working with an athlete who is vegetarian or vegan, to find out their why and find out, what has driven them to choose this lifestyle. And, again, it will allow you to make a better connection with your athlete and understand where they're really coming from with their reasoning behind this. Okay. This I just thought was interesting. So again, we've talked about, the regular food guide pyramid and our standard recommendations as it relates to nutrient consumption each day. Here we can see I've got two different examples of a vegetarian diet pyramid. So with the vegetarian diet, again, you can see here that they've got, Let me get my little pen going here. Fruits and vegetables make up a large majority. We've got whole grains, and then legumes and beans. So again, the legumes and beans are going to serve as a great source for us for proteins. And I would say those are really the key to kind of replacing some of those meat products that the average person would consume. Then we move up the pyramid. They need less, but still very important to consume nuts and seeds. Again, depending on how they classify themselves, if they're going to eat eggs and dairy or not, that would fall into this category. If not, we could replace that with some sort of soy product, or just kind of eliminate that and fill in with nuts and seeds, and then also probably need some more from the legumes and beans category. And then lastly, plants and oils here. And then we can see eggs and sweets kind of at the top of the pyramid here, where we're consuming those maybe a little bit more sparingly. This is an interesting one. So again, this is really the same concept, but in this particular pyramid, we're looking at what we would do for vegans. Okay, so again, eliminate the eggs, eliminate the dairy products, and this will give us some information about what those vegan would want to consume. Okay, so here you can see fruits and vegetables. I like this chart a little bit better because it does give us those serving sizes. So here you can see 5+ servings of fruits and vegetables a day. I would say the average vegan is consuming significantly more than 5 servings of fruits and vegetables each day. Every meal, we should also be consuming some type of whole grain, starchy carbs. So examples, potatoes, sweet potatoes, different breakfast cereals, bread, pasta, rice, etc. Quinoa would fit into that category. Okay, then we move up to our protein sources, which is kind of like your next layer up. Again, beans, peas, lentils. You could use some sort of tofu products or soy products. Peanut butter, almond butter, any type of those nut butters would fit into that category. Then we move up a level and we see that we need 2 to 3 servings of calcium-rich foods each day. So again, you can use some sort of substitute products, so like an almond milk based yogurt, for example, or some sort of tofu item or bread that's going to be fortified with calcium. So again, looking at some of those products that are kind of adding in some of those nutrients that we might otherwise miss out on. Then we move up, we're going to see nuts and seeds for 1 to 2 servings per day. And again, this can be a large variety. Look at almonds, cashews, what else? Sunflower seeds, etc. So all sorts of different products can fit into this particular category. And then we look at the very top, fats, and we want to use those in small amounts, such as olive oil and different vegetable oils would fit into that category. The other thing I do want to point out, and we'll talk more about this as we move through this particular unit, kind of at the bottom there, you can see different supplements. So again, vitamin D, vitamin B12, iodine supplements. So again, it is recommended that for a vegan, we are supplementing the diet with some sort of multivitamin to make sure we're kind of accounting for the possibility that we're deficient in some of these particular areas. Again, here's another great image for us that shows us a vegan food guide pyramid. I like this because it shows us a serving size, and that's important to me. So again, you can see veggies 3 to 5 servings. Again, I would say for a vegan, it's going to be easy to get significantly more than that. Fruits, 2 to 4 servings per day. Again, fruits sometimes get a bad reputation because they are high in sugar. However, we think about these particular sugars, they're not simple sugars. They're a little bit more complex. They're going to be a slow release because they're going to contain fructose in them. So we're going to get this kind of slow increase in our blood glucose levels, which is a good thing for us. Okay, we move up, we see 6 to 11 servings of these carbohydrates, such as whole grains, breads, rice, pasta, cereals. We move up, we can look at some sort of fortified products that are going to help us to meet those calcium needs. So different soy products, for example, beans, legumes, seeds, again, 2 to 3 servings there. And then at the very top, again, we'll see those oils and fats falling into that particular category. So again, not a lot different in this image as what we saw in the previous slide. A little bit of differences there in terms of kind of how they classify each category. So again, on the previous biggest one. I think the fruits and vegetables were in one category. Here we've kind of separated them out to show that this is really the basis of that vegan diet. Okay. So again, what's going on with this in kind of the general world, right? So we're looking at some trends here. So national polls in the U.S. suggest that 3.3% of adults are vegetarian or vegan, and 46% of vegetarians in the U.S. are estimated to be vegan. So again, we think about these different classifications as it relates. You can see that this is really on the rise. You can see the U.S., UK, and Germany. We're seeing kind of a rise in these levels over time, if we're looking at here between 2004 and 2019. Okay. Among athletes, 2010 survey showed us that 8% of international athletes reported eating vegetarian diets, and only 1% of these particular individuals were vegan. A few years ago, I was competing at the Ironman World Championships, which is in Kona, Hawaii. And when I was there, I was doing some research on nutrition. And what I was really interested in was the nutritional plan of athletes leading into a race. So what I did was I surveyed athletes at multiple Ironmans, but I was very interested in what was happening with these elite athletes at the, the world championship level. And so I would survey the athletes prior to their race to find out, okay, what's your plan? What are you going to consume in terms of fluids and, calories? Are you eating solid foods? Are you eating liquids, etc.? So I was very curious to see, what's the quantity? What's the quality? What are the popular products, etc.? It was very interesting to me to see how many of those particular athletes, and again, you're looking at, elite endurance athletes, were choosing vegan products or certainly vegetarian products. So again, it was really interesting to see. I would say significantly more than 1% of those particular athletes were consuming, a vegan diet in that particular regard, or at least a vegetarian diet. And again, maybe we see that more commonly in endurance sports and less so in maybe some of the power sports or sports where being big is an advantage, such as football, for example. So again, just kind of interesting to see, if we looked at in sports, which types of athletes are more likely to choose a vegan or vegetarian diet. I would guess endurance. I don't have any research that supports that. But again, if I were to kind of take a guess, just kind of based on my personal experience working with athletes, I would guess, it's those endurance athletes that are more likely to choose this particular lifestyle. Okay, so next we're going to take a look at some of the potential dietary benefits associated with choosing this vegan diet. So some of the potential benefits we see when following either a vegetarian or a vegan diet, we see a decrease in the risk of obesity, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and cancer mortality. Now, certainly these aren't necessarily issues that our athletes would be concerned with. However, for the general population, when we look at the benefits associated with selecting this type of lifestyle, we do see a lot of health-related benefits. Something that is of interest to our athletes would be benefits such as sports performance. And we don't have a clear link in the research that shows us that sport performance could be enhanced through the use of a vegan or a vegetarian diet. However, we do see research has shown that there is an improvement of mood when we select this particular type of lifestyle. So our research has shown, this was published in 2016, a study that showed that vegetarians reported less negative mood states in comparison to omnivores. Again, I'm not really sure what the justification associated with that is. And again, it could be something, related to association. So again, people that are vegetarian or vegan are maybe more health conscious. And so therefore, they maybe have a better psychological state in comparison to the average individual. And again, that wouldn't necessarily tell us that, eating vegan or eating vegetarian causes a better mood. Again, it could just be an association as opposed to, causality when we look at the reasoning behind some of these particular issues. So let's take a look at this, the major question here. Are we going to see an enhancement of performance? And again, this would be the most important factor for many of our athletes, although some certainly enjoy those health-related benefits as well. So, it is hypothesized that the vegetarian diet could improve athletic performance due to a higher consumption of carbohydrates, antioxidants, and something known as phytonutrients. However, there's little actual scientific evidence to support these findings. Again, there's a lot of buzz going on around this particular idea, and at the end of this PowerPoint, I've given you some information about a documentary which kind of looks into this. But again, I want you to keep in mind that this isn't scientifically backed. So, you think about the amount of bias that maybe goes into some of these claims, and I think that is pretty high. So when we think about this from a realistic standpoint, we have to think about what's best for the athlete, what's realistic for the athlete, and at the end of the day, as a coach, maybe our role is to just help educate our athletes, and certainly we don't want to push them in one direction or the other. That's their decision. And again, if we can give them the most informed and correct information that's available, that can help them to make the appropriate decision for themselves. So what are some of the advantages associated with a well-balanced vegan or vegetarian diet? As we mentioned, it will have you will generally have a high carbohydrate intake, which is certainly an advantage for your athletes, because we know that carbohydrates will serve as our primary fuel source for athletics. We also see a higher than average fruit and vegetable intake for vegetarians. Again, that is good, but also when we think about how this applies to sport performance, we do have to worry about this kind of a high fiber diet for these particular people when it comes to competition day or competition phase. And so I think this is something that we want to find a routine and find a steady lifestyle before getting to kind of championship season. We also see an increase in antioxidant levels and a higher intake in something known as phytochemicals, which can be anti-carcinogenic. So and so this phytochemical, phyto means plant, and so when we look at these phytochemicals, again, it's a compound that is produced by a plant, and again, it kind of works like an antioxidant. So we think that the release of these particular molecules when you consume plant products will protect the cells, and this can protect them from various cancers, for example, or it can protect them from damage that could lead to cancers. So when we think about what is important when we think about, optimizing performance for our vegan or vegetarian athletes, the most important thing that we need to keep in mind is getting enough calories in. And that can be pretty challenging for these individuals if they're eating a large amount of fruits and vegetables. Those aren't super calorie dense, so it can be difficult to make sure they're getting enough energy, so getting enough calories. They should also select foods that are rich in essential nutrients. And these can sometimes be less abundant in vegetarian foods. So, for example, we look at, items such as like watermelon, for example, which might be high in volume, but not high in calories. So, looking at some of those items that might be higher in essential nutrients is important. The other component to keep in mind when understanding the relationship between, volume and calories is that some of these plant products are going to have a lower bioavailability in comparison to some of the animal products. So therefore, it's a little bit more challenging for us to break down and absorb and actually be able to utilize all the calories that we're consuming. So sometimes those plant products aren't as well absorbed in comparison to some of the animal products. So again, when we think about, some of those concerns associated with choosing this particular type of diet, iron is certainly a concern. We can see a decrease in iron intake or a decrease in iron within the blood, which can lead to anemia. When we think about consuming iron, one issue that we see is this issue of bioavailability. And again, I've alluded to this a few times, but bioavailability essentially tells us the extent to which a nutrient is absorbed and able to be utilized. Okay, so when we consume iron in animal form, it has a a higher bioavailability in comparison to when we consume iron in the plant version. Okay, so because that bioavailability is significantly lower in plant products, we need to intake 1.8 times what we would recommend for our average person. Okay, so the vegetarians need to consume 1.8 times the iron recommendation of the average person. Okay, other issues we need to think about are deficiency risk for omega-3 fatty acids, zinc, calcium, vitamins B12, D, and B2, which is riboflavin. So when looking at vitamin B12, up to 2/3 of vegans and up to 1/3 of vegetarians are going to be deficient in B12, and this can lead to issues with anemia as well. And anemia is essentially when we have low iron levels, and when we have low iron levels, that causes us issues with oxygen carrying capacity, and if I can't carry oxygen, then I'm going to decrease my aerobic capacity to do work, and therefore decrease my aerobic performance. People that are anemic will also feel tired easily. They might feel cold or pale skinned. So those are some other kind of signs of anemia. So those are things to keep in mind. Athletes can get their iron checked regularly. For like endurance athletes, for example, I recommend that our athletes get their iron checked at least twice a year. And the reason for that is, you know, like we said, if those levels are low, that can really substantially decrease their performance. And the issue with this is it takes about 21 days of appropriate supplementation of iron in order for us to recover from that. So if we can kind of stay on top of that, again, that would certainly be something I would recommend if you're working with a vegan or vegetarian athlete as well, would be to kind of pay attention to those levels and get those levels checked regularly so that we kind of know where they're at. Vitamin B2 is also known as riboflavin, as we mentioned, and approximately 30% of vegans are going to be deficient in this particular nutrient. Symptoms of this deficiency include like cracked lips, cracks at the corner of like their mouths, sore throat is another example. And the reason for this is this particular nutrient is really important for metabolism. And so if I'm B2 deficient, some areas of high metabolism include like the skin on your lips and like at the corners of your mouth, for example. And so they can become chapped easily or cracked because of that decrease in metabolic rate associated with like replacing those cells, you know, regularly. Vegetarians and vegans also are going to experience lower total creatine levels in comparison to omnivores. And the issue with this, again, we see creatine is a nutrient that we can make endogenously, so we can make it within ourselves. And we can also get it from animal products. Okay, so if the vegan and vegetarians have lower total creatine levels in comparison to the average person, in theory, vegans should be more sensitive to creatine supplementation, and so therefore it can have a greater effect on them or a greater performance enhancement. And research does actually show that to be true. So when vegans supplement with creatine, they do see a greater change in their creatine levels within the muscle, which can then, as we mentioned, lead to a significant improvement in their performance. Now, individuals that would be good candidates to take creatine supplementation would be kind of those anaerobic high intensity types of exercise. And we'll talk about supplementation a little later in this course, and I do have a section where we will cover in a lot more detail a little bit of info about creatine supplementation, because it is a common supplement that we hear about in sport. Other benefits associated with creatine supplementation, our research has shown an increase in mental performance and memory when consumed in vegan populations as that relates to performance. Let's see, I had a couple lists of items that our vegans can take to avoid some of these nutrient deficiencies. So B12, items that are high in vitamin B12 include mushrooms, almonds, milk, cheese, green leafy veggies, fortified breads, and cereals. Good calcium options for vegans or vegetarians would include dark leafy greens, beans, tofu, sesame seeds, almonds, and dairy products. So again, those are just a couple examples of items that we could add into their particular diets. So now let's take a look at some of the specific nutrient considerations for our athletes when considering either that vegan or that vegetarian option. So let's start with carbohydrates. So overall, the carbohydrate needs of vegetarian or vegan athletes don't differ from that of non-vegetarians. The recommendation, again, for general 5 to 10 grams per kilogram per day for most athletes that are performing moderate to high intensity exercise for 1 to 3 hours per day. Again, that guideline is the same as what we would recommend for the average athlete. Okay, intake of adequate carbohydrates should emphasized in light of low carbohydrate diets that may seem appealing to these vegetarian athletes. Again, so it's really important for these particular individuals to make sure they're consuming enough carbohydrates, and that can be super challenging when we're eating a diet that's high in fruits and vegetables. Again, you might just feel full off of less calories, and so if we're not consuming enough calories, that's going to help them or make them feel worn down and not really supply them with the appropriate nutrients that they need in order to fuel their performance. So some examples of carb sources that we could use for vegetarian athletes, certainly grain products, breads, English muffins, bagels, those types of items, fruits, juices, starchy vegetables such as, corn and potatoes, sport products. So, your Gatorade, there's different gels that we could consume or different bars such as a Cliff Bar, for example, are all good options, different granola bars and different items like that. There are certainly, if you go to your health market, there are lots of different vegan bar options similar to, a granola bar that would, ensure that they are made with just vegan ingredients. If someone is super, serious and wants to make sure that they're exclusively consuming vegan items. We think about proteins. Protein requirement can vary for individuals, again, depending on their training level activity type. So anywhere from 1.2 to 2.0 grams per kilogram per day. As we mentioned in our protein unit, our vegans or vegetarians should plan to consume about 10% more protein than the average person, because those plant-based sources might be a little bit more challenging for us to absorb. So when we look at some of the plant-based options for protein sources, I kind of divided this out into vegetarian and vegan options. So again, certainly anything in the vegan category can jump up to vegetarian, but maybe not vice versa. So again, vegetarians would choose items such as maybe eggs, milk, dairy products. Those would be specific vegetarians. Those wouldn't be able to move down to that vegan category. But some, vegan or vegetarian options, tofu, legumes, beans, chickpeas, lentils, nuts, and nut butters. And again, those could kind of cross over into that vegan category as well. So, excuse me. So different vegan options include some soy proteins such as tofu, wheat proteins, pumpkin seeds, lentils, cereals, beans, brown rice, broccoli, quinoa. So those are some examples of good sources of protein for either the vegetarian or vegan athlete. When we think about these different subcategories of vegan, vegetarian, etc., so now I've got a list of items that would be great for those Lacto-Ovo Vegetarians. The good news about dairy and eggs is that they contain all the essential amino acids, so you wouldn't need to consume these particular proteins as complementary proteins, so these items can stand alone and meet all of those amino acid needs for us. So again, milk, yogurt, cheeses, eggs, and cottage cheese would all be great examples here. I would say your cheeses, again, we want to watch for saturated fats when consuming a lot of cheeses. Milks, we want to try to choose a low fat option for that. Same thing with yogurt and cottage cheese. We can choose a lower fat version of those items to make them a little bit more healthy without taking away from that protein source. So when we look at fats, again, fat intake should be in accordance with the public health guidelines. So even for our athletes, we don't want to really over consume fats. Vegetarian diets are typically rich in omega-6 fatty acids. Although, we would like our athletes to consume more omega-3 rich foods. And again, that's not only for the general population, but also for athletes. And so it might be necessary that they take, or recommended that they take, a omega-3 supplement. So again, that can kind of help take care of that particular issue. High fat, low carb diets, not good. Okay, so we don't want to recommend those for our athletes. They'll compromise performance, particularly if we're doing high intensity activity. Again, if we remember back to our unit on metabolism, we know that if we want to do anything with high intensity, we've got to fuel ourselves with carbohydrates in order to make that happen. So again, it would be to our athletes' greatest benefit to avoid low carb options. So some great plant-based sources of fats, some of these healthy fats. Again, these healthy fats are going to allow us to focus on some unsaturated, monounsaturated, and polyunsaturated options for fats. So again, we see different types of nuts, such as almonds, walnuts, peanuts, cashews. I love cashews. So those are all examples of good options for us in the nut category. And again, we can take those and convert them into a nut butter, so almond butter, peanut butter, etc. So those are great options for us. Avocados are another solid choice. Those are going to be high in some of these healthy fats. And again, we'll talk about fats. I believe it's our next unit. Yes, it's our next unit. So we'll be talking in more detail about the different types of fats, but avocados are full of unsaturated fats, so those are great. Olive oil is also a solid choice for us. Canola and sesame oil can also be added in. Flaxseed and chia seed, hemp seed, so those different seed options are great to add to smoothies. You can add them to oatmeal. You could add them to different like muffins. So I'll make like these little breakfast muffins that contain both oatmeal, and I'll either put flaxseed or chia seed in them. And again, they're pretty calorie dense, so I like that. It helps me to stay full. And again, they're great sources of some of these healthier fats. What about the micronutrients? So we want our athletes to pay attention to certain nutrients that are found less abundantly in plant products, including, as we've mentioned, some of the kind of problem children associated with the vegetarian or vegan diet. So iron, zinc, calcium, vitamin D, iodine, vitamin B12, and riboflavin, which we said was also known as vitamin B2. So if necessary, supplementation should be considered. I would probably recommend supplementation for any vegetarian or vegan athlete, just in general, just to make sure they're covering their bases. So multivitamin would be a good option for those particular types of people. Again, we've talked about this, but kind of avoiding low energy availability, or avoiding this red S that we've talked about, relative energy deficiency syndrome in sport. And again, we see this more commonly in our vegetarian athletes in comparison to our omnivore athletes. And again, the reasons for this is they're just simply not able to get enough calories in. They're choosing sort of these high volume but low calorie types of foods that maybe have high fiber, that help you to feel full easily. But when we couple that with this high training demand, we just simply can't get enough calories in. Okay, so it's important for these particular athletes to make sure they're consuming enough calories to match their energy expenditure so that we can avoid the red S. Okay, so now we want to take a look at some of the practical applications associated with, what we would recommend for our vegan or vegetarian athletes. So tips to help you guide your athletes. So athletes should be encouraged to eat a diet that contains a variety of plants, as we would with anyone, whether they're a vegetarian or a regular omnivore. This should include whole and enriched grain products, fruits, vegetables, protein-rich plant foods, and then, if desired, if they're a Lacto-Ovo Vegetarian, then they should also include their dairy products and eggs. Again, variety is the spice of life, and so having a good variety of these options is a great way for us to ensure that we're meeting all of those mineral and vitamin needs as well. Number two, and maybe more important, is education, right? So we need to make sure that our athletes are educated on, what they're doing. They have to know what they're doing if they want to follow this diet. They have to know what foods contain what types of nutrients, and also understand their potential vitamin issues or mineral deficiencies. So it's really, really important that they know from an education standpoint what they're doing, and how to make this change and how to make this change successfully without getting injured from, issues with low energy availability or a deficiency in iron, etc. Okay. And then number three, we want to ensure that the athlete is not practicing a vegetarian vegan diet in order to mask an eating disorder. Again, I've seen this before. So again, if I say that I'm vegan, I can only eat fruits and vegetables, and so that really limits the types of foods or the things that I could maybe order at a restaurant or the items that I could eat at the cafeteria. So again, it's a I don't want to say a common way, but it can be a common way for athletes or individuals to mask maybe some other issues, so that we can't tell that, the real reason that they're not eating much is because of this eating disorder, not because of the diet that they chose. We can also use this to, we've got to keep these things in mind. Eating disorder is not about food. A lot of times it's about, the mental side of things. It's certainly a mental illness that can not only impair our athletic performance, but certainly impact our health, not only currently, but also in the long term as well. When we think about, fertility issues and bone mineral density and those types of things, those are things that can stay with us if we don't take care of them right now. So again, we've got to kind of keep those things in mind. If we have an athlete that decides to become vegan or vegetarian, we also probably should look for maybe some signs and symptoms of eating disorders to make sure that this isn't kind of a mask for that. So again, thinking about some of these key sources of nutrients for vegetarians. Again, so here you can see, what's going on the left in terms of what their job is. And then on the right, you can see some different options for us as it relates to food sources. Okay, so some of our proteins, again, we know proteins are important for the structure of many components within the body, and it's also going to help us repair and recover following exercise. So all sorts of different options there. When we look at healthy fats, again, these will serve as an energy source. Fats are our next unit, so we'll talk about all the different functions of fats in the next unit, but again, provided you with a variety of options in terms of good fat sources for vegetarians. Omega-3 fatty acids are important for inflammation prevention or decreasing inflammation following exercise. Inflammation is a normal part of stress, and so we want to try to get inflammation out as soon as that exercise bout is over in order for us to recover effectively and quickly. Okay, so again, some different options there as it relates to those omega-3s. Iron, again, as we already have kind of talked about, this is an important part of the red blood cell, and the red blood cells are going to help us to carry oxygen, which is really important when we think about aerobic metabolism. So again, lots of different options there as it relates to iron sources. And then zinc is important for energy metabolism and protein synthesis and immune function. It's kind of got its hand in all sorts of different functions within the body. And so it's important that, we take a look at these types of nutrients as well. So one of the factors that we talked about when we discussed our protein unit was this whole idea of complementary proteins. And so the complementary proteins, again, are going to cover our bases as it relates to all the essential amino acids. So here are some example of complementary proteins that would be great for our vegan athletes. So we've got, whole wheat tortilla chips, black bean and corn salsa, rice with peas and corn, beans, spinach, whole wheat pita pocket, etc. So again, these are just a couple different examples of ways in which we can kind of combine some different protein sources in order for us to hit all those essential amino acid needs. So I did want to provide a couple examples of what a normal day might be like for a vegetarian or a vegan athlete. So let's take a look at these. So here you can see on one column, we've got the Lacto-Ovo Vegetarian. So again, those particular individuals are consuming probably both dairy products and also eggs. And then you can see in the next column over, we've got a vegan option as well. So again, these are just some nice examples, fairly complex in terms of the amount of work that you have to put in order to be able to live this lifestyle. So I think that's something important that we share with athletes, is that this isn't going to be an easy lifestyle choice. It's going to require a lot of time and planning in order for you to be able to do this correctly. So again, just kind of something that you can take a look at and kind of compare and contrast. But we've got breakfast, lunch, snack, dinner, and then one more snack as well. Associated snacks with exercise, again, you can see, we've got different options as it relates to, beverages or sports gels, bars, etc. So when we think about, this is from a different source. I was looking at different kind of examples or different ideas about meals for our vegan athletes. So here you can see the general macronutrient breakdown. So again, proteins should account for 30 to 40%, carbs 40 to 50%, and again, that might be even more. The website or the source that I got this information from was specific to running, so it was specific to an endurance athlete. I would think that they would want to shoot for more than 50% of their macronutrients coming from carbohydrates, but maybe this person was eating a large enough quantity that the percentage wasn't as important. And then as you can see here, fats will account for 10 to 20% of our overall caloric intake. So again, I tried to choose some of the meal choices that I've had before and that are not super challenging. I feel like a lot of times you look at some of these different options, whether it's a cookbook or it's, you find recipes and stuff, and I'm like, what in the hell is this item? Like, I don't even know what this food is. How would I even know how to find it or prepare it? So I try to keep things simple with items that I know how to easily find, like at Aldi's or Hy-Vee or whatever grocery store. So again, breakfast choices, and again, this could be pre or post workout. Something simple like oatmeal with bananas or some type of berries, whether it's blackberries, blueberries, strawberries, etc. And then 1 tablespoon of flaxseed as well. I'm not vegan or vegetarian, but I do try to eat super healthy, and so I'll make this and I'll put some vanilla flavored almond milk on it as well. So I'll just buy the rolled oats that are not, there's no sugar added or anything else like that. And then if I get the vanilla almond milk to go with it, then it kind of adds some seasoning and flavor to it. And it's a little bit sweeter, so that's nice. Spinach, again, fairly easy to make, and you can do any sort of combination of these items. So again, I like I mentioned, the almond milk, and I'll get the vanilla flavored almond milk, and then you can, that is a little bit sweet, so that's nice. And then, any type of fruits you want. If you put like a handful of spinach or a handful of kale in, and you blend it really well, I don't notice those at all because I don't really like the taste of kale. I like spinach, but I don't like the taste of kale. But I know it's so healthy, so I'll throw a handful of that into a smoothie, and if you mix it in well, you won't notice it. Almond butter or some sort of peanut butter, something like that, is a good source of both proteins and fats. Quinoa is a fairly easy grain to make, and again, it's got a fair amount of proteins in it as well. So you can do quinoa. It's easy to cook. It's kind of like rice, how you cook it if you've never had it before. Throw in some avocado with that, tofu, kale and carrots again, or any type of sauteed vegetables you could throw in with that if you wanted. I've even made this quinoa breakfast bake, and so with that I'll do quinoa. Again, I choose that vanilla almond milk that I mentioned, and then I'll put whatever fruits I have. So it could be like I might have like frozen strawberries or a frozen berry mixture. It might have blueberries in it or whatever, or maybe I have some fresh kind of overripe bananas. I'll throw those in there, and basically it's just, I'll use like a 9 by 13 pan, and then I'll add like cinnamon, nutmeg, and sometimes I put honey in it as well, and I'll bake it, and it's kind of like a baked oatmeal if you've ever made that before. Pretty easy to make, and then again that might last me for the whole week, or it'll last our family 3 or 4 days, because I'll have make enough that we can warm it up, and it makes a really nice breakfast. It's very easy, then you have it done, or you could use it as a snack as well. Here's some other snack ideas. Again, one of the issues that I kind of see with a vegan diet is just the amount of fiber. I cannot eat peanut butter before I would work out. So maybe I could have this snack if I was only doing one workout and I did that workout first thing in the morning. But otherwise, I can't have like peanut butter, celery, broccoli, those kind of heavier things. That's really hard for me to eat throughout the day. A lot of that if I'm going to do a workout in the afternoon. So again, maybe it's just a matter of planning for me, but with our sports practices, most of the time we practice in the afternoon. So I've got to be ready to run with my athletes and that sort of thing. But here's some other, ideas. So almond, celery, bell peppers, carrots, an orange or an apple with some cashews, different types of trail mix. Again, an almond-based yogurt with berries, apple, peanut butter, different smoothies like we talked about on the previous slide. There's some nice mixes for like vegan protein pancakes. Those are not too bad, and they don't seem to sit super heavy. So that's a nice kind of lighter item. Some oatmeal cookies. If any of you have ever made, like I make these oatmeal energy balls, and it's like oatmeal, peanut butter. A lot of times I'll put chocolate chips in them. You can put raisins or craisins in there. I put flaxseed in there. I'll put honey in it. So again, some vegans would or would not use the honey, and cinnamon in there. And again, I'll make like a big batch of those, and then I'll have, little baggies of 3 of them, and I can take them to school for the day, and then I have, a snack for that. Chia seed pudding, I've never tried that before, but I know you can add some different spices to it to make it sweet or to make it more savory, again, depending on, what you're in the mood for. Some different dinner ideas here. So again, emphasis should be around proteins, and those proteins are going to help us with recovery. So again, any type of sauteed vegetables is great. So I have sauteed carrots, spinach, mushrooms. Again, throw some onions in there too, and really just a nice variety of flavors in there. The quinoa that we mentioned before, maybe you make it more like a Mexican dish with salsa, black beans, something along those lines. I might throw some vinegar in with it too to kind of give it a little more punch. Some sort of wrap. You could include rice, carrots, avocado, zucchini, broccoli, something like that. Zucchini noodles with pesto and broccoli. So again, these are just some examples. The different sources that I looked at had way more examples. I just tried to, like I mentioned, choose items that like I've heard of all of these things at least. I've made almost all of them. I'm not a big tofu fan or the tempeh. I've never had the tempeh, and I've never had that chia pudding before, but again, I think those are super common in the vegan diet. Okay, some different lunch ideas. So again, maybe some sort of big salad where we've got hummus and a wide variety of veggies and roasted sweet potatoes in there. Again, different ideas for different salads: sunflower seeds, strawberries, vinaigrette dressing. Maybe you could do like a roasted butternut squash, steamed spinach, and tomatoes. You could do a sandwich, like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, basically. Use a sprouted grain bread to ensure that it's vegan, and then you could use, like we said, like a jelly or fresh bananas, soy yogurt, etc. Maybe some sort of vegan chili. You can make a big batch of that, and then that's an easy thing to freeze as well, so that you can have portions ready to go. A black bean wrap with tomatoes, corn, avocado, and other veggies. So again, just some different examples there of I don't want to say easy, because none of this is going to be easy. It's going to take a fair amount of time to prep these different meals and these different items, but I think these are some realistic options. But again, this is going to take more time than what a lot of our athletes are willing to put into preparing for lunch, for example. So again, just in kind of a nice summary, I've got 2 slides here to kind of give us a summary and then give you some additional information. But with proper planning, that's really the key to being successful as a vegetarian or a vegan athlete. We do believe that these athletes can meet their energy and nutrient needs, but again, it does take a lot of time. It does take a lot of planning, and they have to be educated in order to make sure that they're not, creating any type of deficits. So depending on food preferences, eating patterns, and training load, the diet of some athletes might contain suboptimal levels of some of those kind of nutrients that we were a little concerned with. So maybe our athletes should be taking a supplement if appropriate, depending on their kind of nutrient status. Again, if an athlete comes to you and asks you like, oh, is becoming vegan or vegetarian going to help me be successful in sport? We have limited evidence to support that idea. Again, when we think about general health, yes, we do believe that eating vegan or vegetarian would, in general, improve the overall health of the individual, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to improve their athletic performance. So again, that's really something to think about when we're trying to advise these athletes on, is this a good idea? Is it not a good idea? So again, a lot of times, we want to give them that autonomy and help them to make their own decision, but, also educate them on how much work this is going to be, and here's what some of the challenges might be, while trying to make this decision. I think the other thing that's important is the timing. If they are going to kind of make this shift, when is it appropriate to do so, right? Do we want them to do it in the middle of their season or the beginning of their season, or should they wait till the end of the season and then they've got, kind of several months before they maybe ramp up, for the next year. So maybe that would be a good time to kind of make this change. And again, I would encourage them to kind of make a gradual change as opposed to just a all or none type of change, because that's a little bit more sustainable, our research shows. So again, those are just a couple different components to really think about when giving our athletes advice on, if this is a good idea or not. Okay. I just provided you with some other resources here. This documentary that I have here, it's called The Game Changers. If you haven't seen it, super interesting. You can find it on Netflix. I would warn you, again, you can probably see what my stance is by what I'm about to say as it relates to being vegan or vegetarian. I would warn you that this documentary is extremely biased. So it's extremely biased. Yes, it does include some science, but it has a lot of pretty powerful testimonials that are pro-vegan. And again, I do think it makes some nice points, but just, be cautious when you're watching that, if you do choose to watch it, because a lot of it is testimonials as opposed to like true hard, scientific studies. And then I just provided a couple other sources. So one of those websites has 50 different sources for vegetarians. And again, I kind of, scrolled through there because I'm just curious, and, different recipes or different advice, common questions that we see when individuals are thinking about making this transition to a vegan or vegetarian lifestyle. So again, just some nice resources, nothing that I'll test you on or anything else like that, but might be helpful for you in the future at some point. So that's it for today. I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for tuning in.